In this module, we are going to discuss about sampling. When is census necessary? Census is necessary when the population is small. That means if you are studying a population wherein all the elements of the population can be studied, it, it is called a census. Take for instance, census which happens in a country maybe every 10 years or so, wherein they want to capture the details of all the citizens in the country. So here, in such an endeavor, it is required in a country what are the characteristics of various citizens in the country. It is compulsory that each element is being sampled. Or suppose if you are studying, maybe take for instance, in a small country like Namibia, and we are studying the clothing manufacturers. So it would be like less than 50 companies would be available who are clothing manufacturers in a small country. At that time, we can suppose if we are studying the labor turnover in in a manufacturing company, clothing manufacturing company, then we can take all the elements within a small, like in this population, when the population is small, we can study each and every element and make conclusion uh, about the population by taking all the elements at a time. However, always it is not possible. Sometimes the population is large. Take for instance, you want to study all the youth in Scotland. Who youth in the Scotland? So youth definition would be age group between 18 to 35 years. At that time, studying all the population, all the members in the group would be quite large. So at that time, we would draw a sample from the population. We would draw a sample, and based on the sample, we would comment on the population. Take for instance, we want to know the minimum qualifications of youth from Scotland. Then we would take out of maybe n number of elements in the population, we would draw a small sample and then we would study the sample and comment on the population, education, and so on. So the steps in sample design follows a particular sequence. First one is to identify what is the target population. So every study will have objectives. So we need to, from the objective of the study, we need to look into what is the target population. Suppose if the objective of the study is to understand the percentage of unemployed youth in Scotland. At that time, the target population would be all the youth from Scotland who are who are unemployed. So at that time, we need to study all the youth. Among them, we need to find out the percentage which are unemployed. So the population in this criteria would be all the youth who are in the age group between 18 to 35. There may be also sometimes confusion in choosing the population, whether the youth means who are living at present in Scotland or who are from Scotland when who have migrated elsewhere. So this all would be clarified in the operational definitions. Once you identify the target population, The next thing would be to identify the parameters of interest. When you talk about parameters of interest, means what is the parameter in the population which needs to be identified in order to carry out the research. In this case, it is the percentage of or proportion of youths which are unemployed. So in the population parameter which is of interest to us in this study is the proportion of youths which are unemployed. So when we draw a sample from the population, we would be calculating from the sample the proportion of youth who are unemployed, and then we would comment that based on the sample we would comment about the population. So the parameters of the population are one, and the parameters of sample are called as sample statistics, and it is also another. So how truly the parameters represent the population parameters determine the accuracy of the sampling. We also need to understand here one more term, population proportion incidence. That means what is the proportion which might be available of a particular characteristics in the population. Take for instance, we are in this case ascertaining the proportion of unemployed. So since we don't have data from Scotland, we can say maybe from England we have a data that 20% of the population are unemployed. So we take that population and we say that roughly around 20 to percent maybe, or 15 to 20% may be unemployed. So why this is required is when we are designing the sample size, estimating the sample size, we need the population proportion incidence. The next element would be understanding. First, we looked at the target population, what are the parameters of interest, and third one would be what is the sampling frame. The difference between the population and sampling frame is in a population, it qualifies all the elements which meets the particular criteria. A sampling frame is more true representative. There would be some people, take for instance, in this case, some youth from Scotland may be residing out of the country, or they may be incapacitated due to various reasons. At that time, they may not be eligible to be sampled for this particular survey. So sampling frame would be the final list from which the sample would be drawn. This brings an end to this module.